good afternoon from me and Project Camille, right?
Yep.
Okay. Because it's a Camry. It's 2007. We have some grinding brakes back here. I don't have any air tools, so I'm going to loosen the lug nuts with it on the ground. So with the lug nuts loose, I'll be picking this up from the center so I can get to both sides at the same time. Going to be going off that little nub off the subframe. Put our jack stands into the pinch welds. Then I will lower it onto the jack stands and we'll see if the pinch welds actually hold it. They do. Okay. I'm just going to leave just a little bit of pressure on the jack here, just for that extra safety. Make sure it's stable. Sounded delicious. So if you ever have this, where you have a lug nut stuck in the socket, kind of like this, especially when you didn't even impact it or anything, I did not hammer this on here. You have to whack it to get it out or stick a punch down in here. So this happens because there's a cap over the actual lug nut and water gets in there, and when it rusts, it swells up. And the lug nut gets stuck on the socket. So the best way to fix this is just to get new ones. That one's not having it. When I punch these out, I try to go off to one side because like these are just a thin metal cap. You can do that, like you're gonna ruin it either way. But if you go right in the center, you'll just poke a hole in the cap and you won't get anywhere. Just need to go off to the side. And then alternate sides so it doesn't get stuck sideways. It's coming out slowly. There we go. So if you can see that at all, it isn't exactly flat anymore, and that's what causes this. So another approach to getting them off is screwing them back on the side a little bit and just wiggling this around and get a little bit more leverage on it that way. Oh, lucky me, tire fell right off. Then I usually set this down behind it so I can sit on it while I work on the wheel. So as you can see here, this is what the rotor's supposed to look like right here. This rough looking stuff where it's like more silvery colored rather than this dark gray, this is where the brake pad's actually grinding, and this is what you hear go every time you hit the brakes. So whenever you see this, this is just definite. Don't pad slap this. As soon as you step on the brake pedal with new pads, you just ruined them. So always replace the rotors when you see this. So our first step with this is to break the bleeder screw loose, and the point of this is because we're going to be pushing the caliper piston back in. And so you want to be able to open that so you're not forcing brake fluid back up through the system. And it's easier to do it now while it's bolted to everything else rather than trying to hold it. So I always break it loose with a 6-point socket. Mine, fortunately, had this entire cover, so it was going to come off easily. Keeps the rust out of it. If it's a little bit stuck, usually you can tighten them first and then loosen them, and they'll usually come right out. So I'm just going to go ahead and give that a quick tighten so it doesn't leak. But after you break it loose, feel free to use an 8-point wrench, or sorry, 12-point wrench. So the slide pin bolts are next. These are a 14 millimeter. Make sure that's on loosen. With your prying tool of choice, come in here and pry this caliper right off. And the parking brake for this car is inside the drum, so these will just press in nicely. I don't need the spin tool for this. Pop the pad off. Oh wow. This is a great example of uneven pad wear. You can see how the outside pad, which is the one here on the right, that one got stuck in the bracket and it wore it out first, where this left one still has a decent amount of tread life left on it. So that's what happened here. We're going to have to take this apart and clean it all up. The first thing we're going to do is open this up, and ideally you might have like a bottle and a hose to collect this. I'm going to use this little bucket. And the reason you do this first is because if this caliper is stuck, I'm going to find out right now. I can stop what I'm doing, go order calipers before I get too far, because as of right now I can put this back on and still drive the car in an emergency. So you can use big, humongous, gigantic pliers like this to push the piston back in. I do not want to do that because a tool like this will put a more even pressure on it instead of pushing it in sideways. It does work, but this is just a little bit better. So just insert it like that, and I'm going to try to push this slowly to not spray fluid everywhere. And this caliper is going in really nicely, just like it should be. So there's no problems here. So the reason these brake pads stuck was of no fault of the caliper. And when you press this in, you need to make sure that this is up too, so it doesn't suck air in. And then when you get to the bottom, leave this tool there and then close this. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is the piston will go out just a little bit. The little seal that moves the piston will relax, and it will suck air back in. So you need to leave that tool there, close this. They don't need to be tight either. Just hit the bottom and then just go a little bit more snug and then leave it. That's all you need. You're done. Now you can take this off, and you can see that little brake fluid there at the end didn't move. And then after that, you can take your brake clean and rinse this off. This brake fluid will eat paint, corrode things. Just gonna get it all off of there. All right, we're done with this for now. Put on our cover and set it up here for safekeeping. And it ain't gonna stay there. Okay, shove this back over here. If you can avoid it, avoid hanging the caliper on this hose, because it will ruin it internally. Set it off to the side. Now we'll take off the pad bracket. Okay, I'm gonna get a longer bar to start with to see if I can get these caliper bracket bolts loose. Don't get much of a swing on them either. I'm going to take a pocket screwdriver just like this and dig out this little rubber grommet, as well to put this in the next rotor. And set that in your bolt pile. If you have a hard time getting this off or broke loose, take a hammer and whack it right here around without hitting the studs. You can put lug nuts on these so you can hit the lug nut and not this. It's going to be stuck on the parking brake shoes. Is it really that rusty? Holy cow. Never done that before. Thing is bad rusty. Oh well. Yeah. You can clean this out if you want to. Never hurts, keeps the asbestos from floating around too. Here I have our brake pads. Well, that's a fancy box. Never bought these before. Like an individual pocket for each brake pad. Huh. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's take your old pad here. And they look identical. So these are the right pads. Should come with hardware. It does. Make sure the hardware matches up too, because sometimes they don't. And you even have to watch for things, even like these tabs that sit in between the rotor. See how this one's much wider than this one? That might be a problem. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, so they sent me 8 brackets. So this fits 2 different models of cars. So there's going to be, well, this tab's going to be skinnier and some are going to be wider. Yep, just like that. See the difference? This center tab right here, one set is wider than the other. So I need to match up my old set, which should be the skinnier one, which it is. So I need the skinnier tab version of this bracket. Take my pocket screwdriver, slice the tape open. Open this maturely, just in case it needs to get sent back. Compare the hat size of the rotor, make sure it's the same, which it is. These are non-vented rotors, like the same. So I like to start off by putting the rotor on backwards, and then spray a little brake clean on there. They ship these with oil on them so they don't rust, and you don't want that oil soaking into your brake pads. So you wipe it off, take it off, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. Take a little rubber plug before we forget about it, and put it in the hole. So when you get your bracket, you want to get rid of all this extra rust. The best way to do this is a sandblaster. I don't have access to one, so I'm going to do the next best thing. Take a wire brush, knock off all the big crap. Then do the other side. And then if you have anything like this available to you, roll-lock disc, wire wheel, anything like that that you can use to get rid of this rust is what you want to use. So you can see here after grinding it, you can see that how the rust actually has a layer on it. You want to get rid of that. If I can get in here a little bit more aggressively. I typically use fluid film. This stuff does really, really good at staying put, like under harsh conditions, like having water underneath of it constantly. So spray this under the pad, under the pad hardware, and it will keep this rust from building up again. And install the correct hardware. Push that tab in so they stay put. Now we're going to take out our slide pins. Luckily mine both move nicely. Gonna wipe them off. I'm not going to brake clean this out. It should be okay since it still moves. Could check it though. It looks good. So I'm going to wipe off whatever I can. And sometimes you'll take these apart and they'll have rubber bushings on the end of them. Those things love to swell up and get stuck, so I usually take them off and throw them away. And for the slide pins, you'll find something like this. They come in little packets, or well, anything really. Sometimes they come in tubes. Anything that says caliper grease, you can use this on contact points. You don't want to use anise because it will turn into a powder and make things worse. This particular one's a really nice blue color. And just paint it right on there. Just get a nice even coverage. You don't need to like drown it, but just a nice even coverage. And just put it back in. Make sure the rubber boot seats back on the lip of the slide pin. Get it to go over that. There we go. And it moves much more freely than it did before. Okay, so this is ready to install back on the car. Get my caliper bracket bolts. I like to use hand tools when I tighten the stuff back up so I don't get it over tight or not tight enough. I can get a good feel for it. So there, have it just hitting and then a good shove more. It's not overly tight, but it is your brake system too. You don't want it, you know, falling off. These little pieces that the brake pads came with, those are squealers. It came with 4, so there's going to be 1 per brake pad. It doesn't really matter if they go for top or bottom or inside or outside. Sometimes it does just because they won't fit. I'm going to put them on the top side of the brake pad. Not really for any particular reason, I just am. Get oriented and, oops, that thing is slick. Snap it right over the top just like that. And so the brake pad gets low enough when this hits the rotor, it'll go and then make it so annoying that you have to change them. Next, I get something like this where it says disc brake quiet. You get the paste stuff, and what you'll do is put it right on the back of the brake pad and smooth it out. And what this does, it's kind of like a rubbery glue. It isn't so much of a glue as it is just rubbery. And so this will keep the brake pads from squealing. So if you hear the high-pitched squeal for the first time in the morning, what that is the brake pad just vibrating really, really quickly. And so you do this, and it can't shake because it's up against this sticky rubber material. They also make a spray that's a little bit easier, cleaner to apply, but this works just fine. Then the last thing, get your caliper grease back out and put this on the top and sides of the brake pads. You don't need a lot, but this will also help with rust and stuff from getting underneath of it. Now these should go in by hand. Push that bracket up. Gonna have to put the top side in first, make sure the squealer gets underneath of it. See how those went in by hand? If they don't go in by hand, there's something wrong. Sometimes if you don't get this rust off enough, they won't want to go in. And same thing for the inside pad. So I ended up having to crawl underneath this. I had to feed the top pad in first. You can see it moves by hand. Oh no, I just ruined it. Okay, there we go. Goes in by hand. So we're good here. So we're ready to put the caliper back on. Which just slides right over. We'll take our 2 slide pin bolts, or caliper mounting bolts, start them by hand. Luckily for me, they're going all the way in by hand, so that makes things go much faster. And then once again, I'm going to tighten them up by hand so I can feel how tight they are. Once again, you don't need them to be like engine crankshaft tight, but they do need to be tight because they are holding your brakes on. And one final check is you need to make sure that this slides back and forth easily, which it does. You should be able to do it with one hand pretty easily, just like that. So this is going to be in good shape for a long time. And there we go. We'll put the wheel back on this and we'll go to the other side. I have the lug nuts run down with the electric impact. I just ran them down and didn't torque or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and raise this back up. Pull the jack stands out from underneath of it. Jack stands out and I'll lower this down. So right here, according to the Shopkey Pro, wheel lug nut torque is 76 foot-pounds. Gonna be honest with you, take that crap with a grain of salt. I am not torquing my lug nuts down to 76 foot-pounds. That'd be a minimum of 100. That's not enough. Not putting my my own safety in the hands of 76 foot-pounds. So I got my torque wrench set to 100 foot-pounds. Torque these down. Do your star pattern to make sure you get an even clamping force. Before you drive the car or put it in gear, even better yet, is pump the brakes, because you'll feel it'll go almost all the way to the floor because all that fluid is going into the calipers, and so this first time you push it you might not have any brakes, so you need to push this until you feel a firm pedal, and then you're okay to put it in gear. Okay, so I'm gonna hit the brakes pretty aggressive. Ready? Oh, 70, and then apply the brakes. Did that 3 times, so we'll see you back at the shop and I'll show you what it did. So you can see exactly where the brake pad's wearing. So like right here, these little lines right there is a little like dirt or debris. The pad's not hitting it quite right. And you can see where the pad is not hitting it right here on the inside. This is the pattern you want to see the entire rotor. So if you don't press them real hard like this, you might just get like a little spot right in the center. You want this fully seated. This also helps your brake performance overall. So the first time you hit the brakes, you'll notice the third time you hit the brakes, it'll be better than the first time you hit the brakes. Other side's the same way. We have a full contact patch. And since our shields are moved, we can probably see the inside as well. So we can see here we have a full contact patch on the inside of the rotor as well. Come up here to the caliper. We can see that this is bone dry and not leaking at all. And this side is dry as well. So now I can put the caps back on it and we're all set. So I'm going to re-torque the wheels. I'm going to check all of them. Since I had the back ones off, I torqued them when I first put them on. You want to torque them after the test drive too, because aluminum rims, see, like that lug nut wasn't tight. And I didn't even have this wheel off. Never hurts to check these. See, that one wasn't tight either.
Touch the tires.
I mean, it wasn't that loose, but those didn't loosen up at all. If you like this video or if it helped you out in some way, feel free to like and subscribe.